Hey everybody! I thought it'd be fun to put a video up of the actual trail that I'm using to test these tires. Maybe this might be interesting for somebody, I'm not sure, but I was out last week testing the Race King, so the fast race tire, versus the Schwalbe Wicked Will with the Super Trail casing, which is a trail kind of light enduro tire, to see how much slower is the more durable tire. I'm heading out for the Breck Epic next week, and I want to go with something a little bit heavier, but I wanted to try to just get some idea of how much the more durable tire will cost me in time. So here are the laps as ridden. I rode 2 laps, then switched the rear wheel and tire, and then 2 laps and switched the rear wheel and tire. And all of these laps are at 164 plus or minus 1 watt. I was shooting for 165, but most came in about 164. Some came in at 165. It was between 164 and 165 for every lap. This is the lap that I'm using, and I've ridden this lap over 250 times. So pretty familiar lap, pretty consistent. It has a couple of things I really like, especially at the end. It's got a long uphill segment and then another down and then kind of another long uphill segment. And so that's what I can really use to nail that power right where I want it to be. And you know, you would think that when you deliver the power on the lap would make a big difference as far as your overall time. But surprisingly, it doesn't make that much difference, at least on this lap for me. It doesn't really matter too much if I come in a little bit low on watts and have to gun it up the last climb, or if I come up a little bit high on watts and have to soft pedal up the last climb. The times have been remarkably consistent, surprisingly so. Here are the laps split into the Race King laps on top and the Wicked Will laps on the bottom. And the Race King laps varied from 14:43 for the slowest one to 14:32 for the fastest one. So only 11-second spread between all 6 of those laps, which is really nice and consistent. I felt good about that. That was awesome. On the other hand, the Wicked Will laps, the slow lap was 15:13 and the fast lap was 14:41, so a whopping 32-second spread between those 8 laps. Now, the first lap in all these tests I've done has always been slow, and you know, a handful of seconds. But even if we throw out the first lap, we're still looking at a 25-second spread on the Wicked Will lap. So I don't really understand why that happened. It felt like the track sped up a little bit during the day, although the Race King lap stayed pretty consistent. So a little bit of a mystery there as to why the variation was so big on those Wicked Will laps. But that's that. Now, if we simply average all those times, the Race Kings ran a 14:36, and the Wicked Wills ran a 14:57, which is 21 seconds slower. If you throw out the first lap, which I usually do, that gets you down to 14:54, or an 18-second difference. So I'm saying somewhere around 20 seconds per lap is the difference between these two tires. And 20 seconds in a 15-minute lap is like a minute 20 seconds per hour of racing. You know, 6, 5, 4, I don't know how many hours it's going to take to do one of those Breck Epic stages, but it's going to take a while. Maybe we're looking at 6 or 8 minutes for the Wicked Will tires. And for me, I've decided that that is going to be worth it because I'm going to have more air volume, I'm going to have bigger knobs for better traction, I'm going to have a lot more durability. And when you're going downhill, even though it feels like you're riding uphill 99% of the day out there, you know, you are going downhill some of the time, and there's no penalty for the slower tire on the descent. Maybe you're even a little bit faster because you've got a little bit better braking grip or something, although not in my case. But I'm going to call it somewhere around a minute per hour is probably, in real world terms, what we're looking at. So having said all of that, let's get on to what these laps look like. Okay, here we go. Day of tire testing on Twister Reverse. And oh man, do I have some excitement today. let me just get up here and we'll explain what's on tap for today. That's our starting point. Okay. All right, so trying to figure out what tires to run in the Breck Epic. And I've got a few different options. I was really thinking I was going to run the Super Trail casings from Schwalbe. But when I tested those against my fastest tires, I'm in the neighborhood of 1 minute slower per lap out here. So we're just going to call that 1 minute per 15 minutes, 4 minutes per hour. And the thing about Breck Epic is like, there's some guys trying to race it, you know, but I am more of a survival rider. Survival, just trying to like make it the 6 days. You know, I've done some long events. I started Trans Iowa, like the OG super long Midwest gravel event. I started that race 5 times and finished it twice. And those were about in the neighborhood of 340 miles and 25 to 30 hours is kind of what it took me to finish the things. And then a 400K out of Cumming, Iowa, which was the 24 hours of Cumming, which was a whole lot different than what I thought I was getting into. But anyway, got through that. Did a Randon A series one year, so the long ride in that was 380 miles or so, like 600 kilometers. So made it through that. Let's see, road. Oh yeah, so I'm good at long 1 day events. You know, last year I did Big Shug, Little Shug, and Leadville. And that was all right in my wheelhouse. That was really good. But these multi-day things, the only experience I have with multi-day things is the Oregon Trail, which 5 days of gravel. And the year I did it was that year they had the crazy heat wave out there. So it was super, super hot. And I gotta tell you, I did turkey out, went from Pioneer to Settler because it was just really insane. I don't know. Anyway, turkeyed out on the last day, dropped down to Settler and made it. But that race, it dang near crippled me. I mean, it was really, as the days stacked up, really difficult for me. Now, I'm from Florida, and I weigh, this morning it was like 194 and change. So, got a lot of body to haul up climbs. And that was maybe a little bit different than some of those super long, gravel rides. But even so, the super long gravel rides all were like, 15 to 20,000 feet of climbing. So it was a lot on Web Patrol, looks like. But anyway, the Oregon Trail, it dang near crippled me. I would say I felt worse coming out of that than I did coming out of that than maybe some of my Trans Iowas. I don't know. It was really bad. And the problem was like just joints, knees and whatnot. It was really, really bad. So I am nervous about this Breck Epic thing. I've been trying to ride this thing this will be the 4th attempt, sort of ish. The first year, Buddy and I were going to do it and got out there, and we were out there 2 weeks early and rode the first stage, and it was, for me, super tough. And then the next day I tested positive for COVID, and this was like in 2021, so it was like OG COVID, and I was laid up for the whole 3 weeks at altitude. Didn't even feel that great coming back. But So I kind of had that in me when I did stage 1. Oh, look at this. A little tree fall. So I had the COVID in me. Didn't know it. But even so, the race seemed, the track, the course seemed really, really tough. And then, you know, I was out with COVID, but I had my camera with me. And so I just found a social distance place to set up shop every day and then photograph every rider every day. Since I was riding myself, I figured, so, you know, got thousands of pictures from that race, got a chance to see all the competitors, and, you know, even the last place finisher in that race is an expert mountain biker, like really very skilled. So I don't know, where am I coming from? I have a lot of respect for this race, and I just want to make it through the thing. And so that's where this tire thing comes in. And this is kind of my dilemma, because the Super Trail casings, I mean, they're durable, grippy. I went with Nabi Nick 2.6 in the front, and then Wicked Will 2.4 in the back with the Speed Grip compound. And those things are super slow. I mean, just really slow compared to my fastest setup out here, which is front and rear Thunderbirds. Those things are, I think they're over a minute faster, or maybe around a minute faster per 15-minute lap, roughly. So 4 minutes an hour, and you know, I might be out there for 6 or 7 or possibly 8 hours per stage. So you think about that over one day, say it's 6 hours, 4 minutes per, 24 minutes. I mean, even if we're conservative, say 20 minutes, that's sort of like ride a super long and demanding stage and then ride another 20 minutes. And if you push that out to the whole week, then 6 times 20, you know, you're looking at like an hour and a half of total time difference, you know, with the other tires. Okay, so that was very disconcerting. But then I was like, you know, you're not gonna ride Wreck Epic on Thunderbirds. I mean, like, I'm not going to, you know, no way. All right, here we go. Good morning. Okay, I'm alone. Good morning. So, you know, yeah, it's a minute faster per lap, but it's not actually tires you actually ride in the Wreck Epic. Like, that's, you know, great and all, but like, you know, what if you actually rode out here some tires you'd actually maybe possibly ride? So last week came out, do the carousel here, and rode the big heavy tires against what I would consider like maybe the lightest tire that would work for me there, which was Racing Ray front with Super Ground, and you know, I just got what I have laying on the peg, but Booster Pro SCT in the back. And that was actually, my data was a little bit messy. You know, the track was getting faster like it might today, but I kind of felt like that was like 45 seconds slower. You know, so it was like 15 seconds faster, maybe 30, but it wasn't, I just don't think it was like night and day faster. So like, you know, well, what if a guy ran maybe not quite such a big front tire, but kept the rear one the same? So that's one of the setups I want to test today. It's going to be Racing Ray front, Super Ground, Wicked Will back, Super Trail. And
So that's a lot of logs down last week. So that I think has some merit. I think, I'm not going to be pushing it super hard on the descents. I'm not going to be really pushing that front wheel into massive rock gardens. I might lean back and hope for the best a couple times, but I just don't think I'm going to be stressing the front tire all that hard. I'm not going to be pushing it super hard on the descents. So maybe that would work. So that is setup one. Let's try that one. And what are we going to compare it to? Well, my online buddy BMC. He's like, yeah, I use Race Kings on everything, including World Cup World Cup Enduro courses. And I'm like, whoa, what? And he's like, yeah, I've done it. And I'm like, oh, really? So my buddy happens to have a Race King kicking around, and I'm like, dude, let me try the Race King and just see how it compares on the back versus the Wicked Will, and we'll just keep the front the same. So let's just see what this does for us. I think there's some nuance to this, decision, of course, but that is what I hope to test today. And I did bring the big front tire along. Might swap that out at some point just to kind of see if I start getting good consistent lap times. I feel pretty confident in my data. Then I might throw the super big heavy setup on again and just double check it. Because one of the things about racing in these long things or whatever is like you don't want to optimize yourself right into a DNF. And there's a lot of ways a guy can do that, But the way I'm worried about is optimizing my tire choice for speed, but then having tire problems on the course. And you fast guys, you don't know what we have to deal with the back of the pack. In the mountains, let's see right up. In the mountains, sometimes you get those afternoon rains. And like here in Florida, if you're out in the summer and get caught in a rainstorm, it's this soft, warm rain that actually doesn't feel too bad. You're almost like, this is kind of nice because it helps with the cooling a little bit. So, it's no problem. You're not going to die. You're gonna maybe even feel a little bit better. It's okay. And again, you mountain people, this. Rain out west in the mountains, it is comes on fast. You don't have time to prepare. It's 31.1 degrees temperature, so it's super cold. It's almost ice, melting down, almost ice. And I'm just envisioning, it's 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock or whatever, and I'm trying to get down the second to last descent before my climb back up and then drop into town, and I've got some kind of tire problem, and now it's pouring rain. I'm not heat adapted. Hell, I live in Florida, for God's sakes. Gonna be hypothermic in a matter of seconds. So, and you might get lucky. It might just be a quick plug and don't even have to add any air. That'd be great. On the other hand, could be a big old sidewall rip, and you're footing it out to the aid station where you can hopefully grab into the tire, get it on, and somehow make it to the finish line. Which that sounds god awful, horrible, terrible. And I really don't want that. But on the other hand, I don't want to ride an extra 20 minutes either. So that's what we're trying to figure out today. Okay, now we're coming up at the end of lap 1. And this is where I gotta get my power. 165. Running every lap at 165. 161. And we're on this last climb. And you guys, you wouldn't believe what we call climbs here, but we're technically going uphill. 163. 164. 165, okay. Good shape. Let's see what we get here. First lap is usually slow, and with the traffic, it wasn't much traffic, but it's gonna be probably slow. I don't know. We'll find out. 15, 12, 15, 13. Actually, around 15, 14. Well, there you go. So, remember that number. Remember that number. I want to go 2 laps, 2 laps, 2 laps, 2 laps. Just switch every couple laps. And try to minimize the downtime a little bit instead of swapping every lap. But what happens, you know, is the track conditions change over the hours. And so you kind of end up getting messy data depending on the day. And it's been raining like crazy, you know, it looks pretty wet here. So the track is soft and bumpy, and it might get faster. It really might, which is gonna make it difficult to know what to do. But it could happen. So, you know, the other thing is that if I say 1 minute per lap, it's not really 1 minute, because even though it feels like at the breakup if you're going uphill 99.9% of the time, you actually aren't. You're actually going uphill, I don't know, less than 99%. And on those downhills, the big tires don't hurt you at all. Let's see what this feels like. Jump line, middle one. Wow. Yeah. Whoa. Hiya. Okay. Hi. Yeah, when you're going downhill, you're on the brakes. You don't want to be running a faster tire. You want to be running a slower tire. So, you know, say it's 80% climbing, I don't know, 90% climbing, whatever. There is some, what the heck? Hold that thought. Visor is loose. Now let's fix this. All right, hold everything. We're gonna fix this before we jump to lap 2. Yeah, that's a full face helmet. It is. It is. Because I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to mess this up. You know, I got events coming. I don't have time to go in for orthodontic work in case something happens. You know, I'm also wearing knee pads and shin guards just because I don't have time for an injury at this point. I mean, it's relatively comfortable. It's not too bad. I'm not complaining. Huh. All right, oh, whatever. That dude's Subaru, he had that awesome burbly aftermarket exhaust. Oh yeah, sounded great. I mean, I'm an EV fan, but that thing sounded really good. Oh, here we go, something. Oh, we got guys everywhere. Holy cow, thank you. All right, thank you. Now, I mean, never see this much traffic out here. Thank you, sir. Not a chatty bunch, but you know, whatever. Okay. So, if, say 10%, even 20%, 10, say 10% of your time is like you're on the brakes because it's downhill and just scary as hell. That slower tire isn't hurting you at all. They're probably helping you because you got bigger knobs, a little more traction would be really great. Now I don't plan on pushing it on the descents, believe me. I just want to get down there without broken bones. And, you know, the Breck Epic, the year my buddy did it, I swear there were a dozen dudes out with broken bones. Like, there's 400 people in this race. And if a dozen of them were out with major injuries, what is that? 3 per 100? It's like 1 in 30? I mean, and you know, everybody there knows what they're doing. You know, when I was shooting pictures and saw these guys come by, even the last place guy is a darn good biker compared to just, you know, local recreational riders. I'm sure it's different, like in Boulder where everybody's a pro, but like, you know, where I lived up north, northern Illinois, and not in Florida, not exactly super big hotbeds of, you know, racing or whatever, but there's plenty of racing going on. When you're just out on a regular trail ride, you know, they're going way faster, and I'm not a fast dude, really. I mean, I like to think so. I rode time trialing pretty fast, but you know. So all these riders are good riders, and even so, we're talking a significant risk of severe injury. And like, I'm 56. I don't want to break a bone now. I don't want to break a bone ever. You know. So I'm not going to be pushing it super hard. So I kind of feel like more grip is more of a, I don't know, sort of an insurance policy kind of situation when it comes to the descents, and not about going faster. But I think there could be some advantage to that, and it might shrink the time gap between the tires. Because on this course, you know, you're pedaling the whole time because it's flat. So there's that. Okay. What else? Let's see. I just really hope I get some consistent lap times. I just want to get, I mean, I have had, you know, 4 or 5 laps within 10 seconds. And that gives you confidence that, you know, what you're seeing is maybe real, you know. But yesterday there was significant drift between the first lap and the last lap, so it was kind of like, you know, come on here. It's pretty obvious that the super trail tires were significantly slower, but how much? You know. My first time check is at a corner up here, and I had a good lap, kind of around 4 minutes, maybe high 350s if you're on a heater. And if the track's running fast, which it's not, but fast track, fast tires. You know, I tell you what, we're only 413, but our power's high. It's at a 167 Av, so that's gonna mean you get there faster. You get there faster. All right. This is the hardest cornering area of the course, but at this pace, it's relatively straightforward. Not too technically demanding. There's a couple corners out here where you need to engage the side lugs, but anyway, yeah, so tell you what, I think we're gonna we'll just skip ahead perhaps, unless some interesting conversation comes up until we get to the end of this lap. We'll swap tires and see how it goes. Mounting up that little Race King. I mean, it's the 2.2, but it's narrow, and I'm running liners all the way around. because a little added insurance, and I'm certainly not worried about 150 grams of rotating weight. Like, I could care less about that. But it was kind of a bugger stuffing the tire line into that little Race King. And then once it's in there, it's like there's a significantly decreased air volume in that tire. So that's going to make it feel different, or what the heck. So, we're on my standard tire pressure, 18 front, 20 in the rear, and the rear tires, you know, this one's bigger and got a more robust casing, and you may be able to run it less than the Race King or whatever, but I'm just going with my standard 1820, so whatever that's worth. And we're running a different camera today, so we'll see if we can get some fun, I don't know, some decent views. I'm just hoping for like decent views, something that's halfway good. It's a good day for riding here. I mean, it is, and humidity is like 100%. Everything's like super wet, but the temperature is not that high. I mean, it's got to be 80s at this point, can't be higher than somewhere in the 80s. And it's overcast, so that this unbelievably intense infrared heat isn't really a factor. So that's nice. I'm supposed to have another downpour this afternoon, so see how many laps we can get in before that happens, or maybe we'll just be able to ride until we're done. Don't know. Not sure. It's kind of funny how Leadville and Breck Epic are compared. They're really much different races. My buddy and I did Leadville last year, and last year he was sick. He was able to ride it, but I mean, he was really struggling all day. Rolled in just before like 12 hours and 15 minutes, 12:45, I don't know what it was, something like that. And we rode together till Columbine, and then, I mean, he was just dying. And I was like, man, you know, if we're gonna make 12 hours, keep riding with you. So, you know, we both agreed to, like, one guy's struggling, and the other guy was worried about making the time cuts, that he just cut him loose, you know. So I was like, love you, dude, but gotta cut you loose. And so rode the rest of the thing. It came in with stops. It was like 11 hours and 10 minutes. So that was really great because, you know, I've got some age class state time trial jerseys in my closet, you know. But that type of racing is completely different out there. You know, if you can fold yourself up into an aerodynamic position and stay on the gas for 53 minutes for your state 40K that's flat and at sea level, yeah, that's great. Good on you. You know? But none of those things really apply to Leadville. And so it just isn't, I wanted to take on a big challenge and hopefully, you know, succeed. And that's totally the way it is with the Breck Epic. But it's never like I was going to be competitive, you know, in that arena. You know, back in the day, the Schwalbe, so I was a 13-time starter and finisher in the Schwalbe 40. And I had a lot of finishes in that 70 to 110 range, somewhere in there. And again, this was back in the day, so it's not, you know, as competitive as it is now, but still, there were plenty of super fast dudes in that race. That was back when you had to get in a lottery to get in that race. It was so popular. And that was back when we thought 43 miles was, or whatever it is, 40 miles off-road was just unbelievably epic. You know, so I just, what I'm trying to say is, like, I do sort of have a decent turn of speed in the right event for my age. So with all those disclaimers, but Leadville was never like, you know, it just, I don't think we're gonna get sub 9 this time around. You know, it's possible when I was younger and stronger and maybe, you know, might have had a chance, but probably not. Probably wasn't ever in the cards. And so for me, Leadville was a, you know, want to do the experience, want to give it a try. It was super fun, but no desire to do that race again. A one and done for me. Recommend everybody do it once or whatever, but you know, not going to be multiple. And it's the same thing with the Breck Epic. If I can get through this sucker, I'm going to be like, okay, we're good. You know, I had to defer my Unbound to this year, to next year, and kind of hoping I can, you know, keep the fitness good and lay down a really fast time at Unbound. And I wouldn't mind getting it to Sea Otter. Then I would have ridden all the Grand Prix events, not necessarily in the modern era, but you know, that'd be kind of cool for an amateur. That'd be great, you know. What the heck? Maybe I can talk my wife into going to California for a week or two in the spring. Sounds like a great trip. So, but my buddy, on the other hand, he has some unfinished business out there. And he is looking for redemption. And, you know, our training has been very, very different. You know, he needs a certain amount of speed and he's got to hold it together for hopefully 11 hours. Whereas I need durability and don't really care too much about speed. I mean, I don't want to necessarily keep the sweepers out there after dark or anything, but you know, kind of not really going to be competing for anything just to complete the distance. It really feels to me a lot more like a randonnée. I'm in the Fondo class, so did my best to get in the appropriate class. Me and one other dude gonna be hanging out, hopefully. Kind of fun. But yeah, so his FTP is going out and I'm trying to stack up a few big days together once in a while. Okay, coming into lap 2. Oh, we're like 10, we're like 15, 14, 15, 15, 14, 15. I think it ended at 15. So we'll see. Let's see where we are here. 14, 18 right now, so we got about 1 minute to get to the line. This should be a little faster. The first lap's usually pretty slow. And then I did that little bit of traffic on the first lap. So let's see what we can do here. Right on 165, so 164, that's weird. Okay, 165. All right. All right, we're right on 165 and 1503. Okay, so that's not too bad. Within 15 seconds anyway. And that, like I said, the first lap, I'm gonna have to throw that out. So, what I propose is we drive back to the car, swap our wheels, and see what the next lap turns out to be. All right. We are on the Race Kings. Oh my gosh. It is really humid. I mean, it's not super hot, but I mean, there's like water everywhere. I mean, man, and sand and sticky everything. I mean, whoa. Okay, so riding from the back of that lap and changing the wheel is going to come in right about 7 minutes. So that's pretty good. That's not bad. Hopefully not too much has changed since our last lap. This is where we see what we get here. A lot of the stuff, like, it feels faster, you know, but then again, you know, if I didn't know, I might not pick it up. You know what I mean? It just, without the stopwatch, I just haven't been able to really draw many conclusions other than the big heavy tires are just really slow. And I've done that experiment a few times. You know, I had a bike that came with the Maxxis DHF up front and like a, 2.4, 2.5, something like that. And that tire, just swapping out the single tire, was like 30 seconds slower on this lap. And then had a specialized butcher with the, it was like the T7 rubber. The I'm using air quotes, the faster rubber. And that one also is about 30 seconds. And then the Super Trail tires, 30 seconds slower each. You know, that's what it felt like. So, you know, I don't know. It really kind of adds up. If you're, you know, like, use the Schwalbe as an example, because, you know, I get some experience in that race. A lot of times my time would be between 220 and 230, somewhere in there. You know, 230, 220, 223, 225, I don't know, whatever. And that top 100 at the Schwalbe was really, I mean, that was a big goal for certainly a lot of the guys I rode with. You know, it's 2,000 rider race or whatever, and top 100 is kind of right up there, sort of. You know, I mean, you're obviously not in the sight of the professionals, you know, but for a regular dude, you know, that was a pretty good goal. And the difference between like 50th and like 100th was like 3 minutes. I mean, it was, you race your guts out for the better part of 2.5 hours, and the difference is not very much. So when it comes to really racing for a place, I mean, fast tires that get you to the line are super, super important. And but you also have to get to the line. So that's where the whole tire thing is just a never-ending conundrum, you know. We'll see. Let's see what we get. Around this corner up the hill, and we're get to our first checkpoint. Okay. So we're about 4:12. I think that first lap we were like 4:30 there, something like that. So that could stretch out to 30 seconds pretty easily. Little rear section. Actually utilizing the side knobs a little bit. Alright. I'm only sitting on 150 watts at the moment, so I'm below pace a little bit. And still running pretty quick. The other thing that kind of crossed my mind is maybe a guy runs different tires on different days. Like, I think specifically I'm thinking about the last day. You know, the last day out there is a fair bit of gravel road, you know, pretty smooth gravel road. And, you know, not super crazy technical, you know, I don't think. I mean, you're going up Baker's tank, which is kind of like embedded baby heads, so coming down it's pretty bumpy, but going up I'll probably be walking, so not gonna be bumpy for me, you know. And maybe guy just swaps out the rear roof at the last stage. Could do it, you know. On the other hand, at that point, saving 10 minutes may not be worth the effort it takes to even change the wheel, you know. Maybe it will, but I can do that. I have been getting on the treadmill and doing some walking at 15% because for me, you know I'm going to be walking for a significant amount of time every day. And I don't know, maybe it goes around here, so you guys got to get it in somewhere. I thought maybe I'd do a little bit of walking to try to get used to that kind of stress. And then, of course, that leads you into shoes. Now, this is going to be maybe a bit of an unconventional strategy, but when it came to Leadville last year, I was like, you know, I'm going to be walking all or most of the goat trail for sure. And then there's going to be some walking on Powerline, Powerline inbound, which I rode almost all that lower slope, but it wasn't worth it. I just got cheered on and, you know, had the whole showing off for girls thing going on, so it wasn't really a good idea, but I walked some of that climb farther up for sure. And I was like, you know, I might be walking for 30 minutes in this race, and it's going to be over probably uneven terrain. And you know, I use the CD Dominator mountain bike shoes. Like, okay, our time's 7:58, so we're 30 seconds off of a heater, but we're 15 seconds ahead of last time, and we're only sitting at 149 watts. So pick up at some point. Maybe we'll do it on this climb that's coming up. So, like, you know, and the CDs, they, you know, again, for me, do not walk very well at all. They're, in my opinion, the best looking mountain bike shoe. I don't know, some of the high-end white mountain bike shoes look pretty cool, but, you know, pretty good looking shoe, pretty good performing shoe when you're pedaling. But walking, really, really bad. And I had done some testing with flat pedals and put them on my home trainer. I was able to ride, you know, I think I did like a 4 or 5 hour ride with flat pedals on the home trainer, and that seemed perfectly fine. I also ramp tested on the home trainer versus clip-in pedals, And I ended up with like exactly the same power. I'm like, that's crazy. Because everybody knows that clipless pedals, you can lay down more power than flats. Everybody knows that, right? Except, you know, you look at something like Pro BMX, still got some guys running flats. And those guys are the, you know, sprint masters, $10 sprint masters. And then you look up downhill, and enduro, some of those guys, they're running flats. So technical sections doesn't seem to be a thing. I'm kind of like, you know, my testing shows no difference in the pedaling part. But, and I wasn't really able to test this, but I'm as sure as I can without data that I walk faster in a sneaker, a running shoe, than I do in a cycling shoe. So I made the decision to run flat pedals and essentially running shoes. And man, did I get ridiculed for that. I also spun on a 28 tooth ring because I know I can spin fast on the rollout. I have no doubt I'm going to be able to keep up with a 2810, no problem. And it's only going to help me later on, you know. So that I was also ridiculed for, you know, not by my buddy, because he's into data as well and tested all this stuff, and I think he thought it was a little weird, but you know, he could certainly understand my thought process, whereas some people couldn't understand my thought process. But that was my setup, and I will tell you that on the Go Trail, way up high, I was passing people. I was passing people right and left on that Goat Trail. They were cranking along with their wooden shoes, and I was just padding along right past them. And I made up a lot of time on that walking section. And so, you know, this doesn't apply to fast guys, but you know, if you're trying to make the cut, if you're looking at 30 minutes to 45 minutes or more of walking, you might want to consider having a shoe you can walk in. Rec Epic, I'm planning on going, you know, mountain bike / hiking shoe. So maybe we kind of get the best of both worlds, maybe. But I'm bringing flats and my trusty running shoes too, because I could see possibly switching, especially for stays like Wheeler, where, you know, for me it's gonna be more of a hike with a bicycle than an actual ride. And maybe some comfy shoes would be, you know, maybe a little faster, maybe a little easier. Hell, I might be getting off on the downhills on that stage. So, you know, I don't know. I'm probably going with the walk style shoes. I think maybe I'll walk on the treadmill with them and just kind of see how it feels. I think it's probably going to be pretty good though. All right, 3:59. We gotta pick it up here a little bit. Yeah. 62, 63, 64, 65. Okay. Oops. So we are right on target. The 14:15, We're nowhere near a minute away, so. Shocker. Shocker, spoiler alert, it's gonna be faster. 165. 166. 165. Okay, here we go. 14. 44. 1443, but it rounds to 1444. So that's 30 seconds faster. 30 seconds faster. Boy, I mean, and that's just switching the rear tire. I did some riding around the block in the neighborhood, had some super consistent times, and I could not prove that one of my wheel sets ran faster than the other. So that was kind of nice to prove it ain't the wheel set. At least for me. They're pretty comfortable. One is the Hunt. I don't know what the hell is it. The one with the carbon spokes, unbridled, unbound, invincible, challenge, podium. Come on. The Hunt. It'll come to me. Senior moment. The other one's a DT Swiss. It's got a, light, kind of like trail-ish rim. Laced up to the DT 240s, which is nice light upset. So it's a little heavier than that. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. That jump line. So I've ridden, not exactly sure what my lap count is on that lap, but it's in the neighborhood of 250 laps. And usually I take the jump line. Sometimes when I'm not testing tires or training or anything, I'll just do laps on the jump line. And I'm not that good at it. I tend to kind of get tipped off to one side or the other, and kind of like a big old 200-pound lawn dart going up. Like, you better have stuff under control at takeoff, because there's no adjusting it in the air. Just didn't happen. So below. Stop by and put a little air in. I don't have any seal in this thing. It's air's coming out like crazy, so let's just do this real quick here. Come on. Come on. There we go. All right. See what ran that lap at. I'll put sealant in once I finalize my choice. That was 15 maybe. Not too bad. I'll go back up to 20. I have to pump this before every stint on these tires, but that's all right. All right, that's good. Since I'm here, let's just do a little bit of this. If I can get one of these in my mouth or not. That's the problem with the full face helmet. Okay. Yeah. yeah, so when we take off, that's it. Nothing's gonna change when we're in the air. And if we're off balance, it's only gonna get worse before we splatter ourselves on the ground. And you look at riders that, you know, good riders, you know, they never do a dead sailor, ever. They're always adjusting their situation in the air. And I think that ability to kind of adjust your equilibrium, staying in balance in the air is really, really important. It's like that way in skiing too, for me. Just, you know, like a lawn dart. And I blame this on the situation in the 80s in the Midwest ski areas. I mean, and you're like, what? And I'm like, no, seriously, you guys wouldn't believe this, but like, back in the day, you were strictly forbidden to jump in Midwest ski areas. Ski patrol was out in force. It was kind of back in a time when we respected the ski patrol. And, you know, now it's, you know, here's some rails and some incredibly huge jumps, and have at it, guys, you know. But back then, I mean, you were risking your lift ticket. You pulled any of that crap. So I just feel like there's a whole generation of us that never really learned how to become comfortable in the air. And you know, small town Midwest, we didn't have any crazy BMX parks or anything like that. Like, you know, I mean, some guys out in California were ripping it up in the magazines, but you know, that wasn't real life. Some of us. So he's never developed that feel of being in the air. Now, since we weren't jumping, the only thing to do is to learn how to turn better, and I think a lot of us in that generation really learned how to carve, you know, super well. I see it all the time in videos now where like the person skiing is like not that good of a skier. Like they're just not technically good. But man, can they jump and fly through the air and land in perfect balance. And it's like super impressive. And I don't know how you get that when you're in your 50s, you know? This jump line, I mean, I probably have ridden it a couple hundred times, doing laps. Whoa, nice. And then some days just, you know, lap after lap. And you might get, I don't know, 20 runs in, something like that. I was gonna say like 300 times, just to kind of try to come up with a number. And still, pretty shaky. Pretty shaky. I had to say, pretty shaky. Whereas the guy that knows what he's doing, like literally, he knows it just once. He's styling, he's looking good. There's just absolutely no problem at all. I'm like, man, how do you get that? Took a jump clinic from Rick Drew. Yeah, he came down here to Florida, put it on. A bunch of us middle-aged people trying to learn how to jump, and it's a good clinic, you know, because part of like learning is just being around people that are good at it and talking about it and thinking about it and focusing on it, and maybe you learn a few things. Okay, so here we're sitting at 158, 410. So that's all. Unfortunately, you know, it's kind of in that one more jump kind of situation, and had a tire rolling situation and lunged out the side of my body. Yeah. So I wasn't really able to you know, once you learn a new skill, you want to kind of get some mileage, ingrain that, so it's kind of like your new normal. But that didn't happen, so that wasn't great. But still, not super awesome at jumping. Kind of wish I was. Now the counterpoint is that in the 80s, I didn't rupture my cruciate. I didn't dislocate my shoulder or break my collarbone or have a concussion or anything like that. I made it relatively unscathed. And I guarantee you, you know, you're young, you're invincible, power friends, and there's these monster jumps, you know, you're probably gonna hit them. And you might actually have those injuries that they were trying to prevent. So maybe it was a good thing. On balance, I don't know. I guess it probably is. Once you get to be older, you're kind of like, I'm glad that I didn't completely destroy myself as a young person. I mean, everybody's got aches and pains in their 50s, I think. But for the most part, came through okay. And would like to come through Breck Epic okay as well. You know, the stats on Breck Epic are pretty bad when it comes to broken bones, but I was just on a trip where, surprisingly, it's just about as bad. So my wife and I have a tandem bike, and we've kind of been getting those emails from Santana tandems for a lot of years, and decided to go with my buddy and his wife on one. And this was like the first time they ran this particular tour. So I feel like some of the kinks maybe weren't totally worked out, you know. But I found it the most dangerous riding I've ever done. And that's saying a lot. I mean, you know, I've been racing my bike since like 1990. And it was so sketchy one day. We stopped in the middle of the ride and said, we're not going on. We're not doing it. I don't care if I have to throw my bike away and catch an Uber back to the cruise ship. Not doing it. It was because of like traffic. You know, you got this cruise ship into, you know, ports that weren't always like commercial cruise ship ports. Some of them were like industrial ports, and so the traffic was pretty heavy industrial traffic, and it wasn't like the, you know, bike lane situation was kind of non-existent. You know, and I don't blame any drivers over there. They're trying to get through their workday, and they got all these tandems in their way, and I'd be kind of irritated too. Okay, let's see, we're 755 on 153 watts, so that's pretty fast. But I just felt like I was one bobble away from getting mowed down for like most of the trip. So there were about 300 people on the trip. I think like half a dozen maybe were out with broken bones or concussions, or, you know, just hard wrecks. And oh my God, that's supposed to be on vacation. Supposed to be having fun. I mean, that's again like, you know, we're gonna do this ride, and we're gonna line everybody up, and we're gonna take every 50th person out back and break their collarbone. Like that's what we're talking about. I mean, nobody do that. But that was statistically what you were kind of looking at. So, I don't know. Risk is kind of hard to figure sometimes. Hard to know when your number's up. We're running Sunday here in Florida, and there was a car that was going down a semi-rural road that had those overlapping, like overhanging, you know, big oak trees that are so beautiful. and a branch fell off and landed on the car, and it smashed it like a pancake. And they didn't make it. And it's like, well, can you imagine riding down the road, enjoying the beautiful Florida scenery, and like, that's it? Your number's up? It's up, I guess. So you can't control everything, but maybe you can control some things. And certainly there's times when taking a risk is worth it. You know, as long as it's not a terribly risky risk. I don't know. It's complicated. What can I say? Complicated. I feel like the track is running fast, but I don't know. I'm smoking along. Might be on a heater. We'll see. What I really want is consistency. But I don't always get that. Somewhere in here, oh, a real fast lap here. 10:34, 10:35. We're about 11. I think it's a solid 30 seconds faster though. I'm still only sitting at 158 watts, so fast. This is kind of this long climb on the backside of the lap. I mean, it's not really a climb, but it's more like gently uphill. But it's a nice place to kind of get your watts up if you've been lagging. Try and keep things sort of consistent. This track might change a minute in time depending on the conditions. I mean, it really could, because you go through the winter and spring and it doesn't rain down here for like 3 months. This thing gets worn in. I mean, really, really smooth and fast. You know, you're motoring. You know, for the last month it's been raining like every afternoon, so it's just pretty soft and bumpy and just flat out slower. So this method of testing tires, it's not good for coming up with a CRR number. You know, that didn't work. But it is good comparing one tire to the other, because you're running on, you know, if not the same, at least very similar conditions. So I kind of feel like that has some merit compared to some other forms of testing. .161, we're coming across the bottom here into the final climb. .60, that's about where I want to be. Gets me kind of gunning a little bit. Climb. .61. .62. 63, 64, 165. So we're right on schedule here. Oops, 166. A little bit, my final The corners. And 142. So that's good. That's good. You're right in there. You're right in there. And you know, it's putting it about actually 30 seconds. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Sure might be. You know that race starts with the ride up the pavement up Boreas Road, and then turns to gravel, and like, you know, it's not super long, but just thinking rolling out with that, with the fast setup, just make that first climb so much more fun, so much easier. Oh, the other thing, so 26 tooth, I run 32 here because, you know, whatever, 32, 34, somewhere in there. 36 would be fine too, you know. I want to stay in the middle of cassette a little bit more here in the Midwest. Oh yeah, we got jump park action. Cool helmet. All right. Yeah, so So 32 ring, 28 tooth in Leadville, which again was fine, you know. I mean, I did have to spin maybe 120, 125 RPMs for some stints during the rollout, but I never felt like I was completely spun out and like was incapable of going any faster on that rollout. And you know, air's thin up there, it's downhill, I weigh a lot. I mean, my rollout speed is pretty good, you know, given the corral I'm in, I'm rolling pretty good, you know. It's a different story when things start going up, but pretty good going down. And 28 was totally fine. But wreck epic. I'm like, you know what? I'm going 26. I'm going 26. And so I do have a 26 tooth ring, which is going to go on this bike, and we're going to see what that's like. Oops. 26 tooth ring. That is going to be something. That is going to be a different sort of beast. But I guess I just figured, like, you know, I did spend a significant amount of time in my 10 in that race, but most of that was like coasting, like all the way down Columbine. It was just in the 10. And I was coasting a lot of that. It wasn't, you know, pushing the pace or anything like that. I was kind of rolling along. The second most common gear ratio I was in was the 52. And that one, I was pedaling. And pedaling hard and pedaling low RPM, you know, like you might imagine. And I'm just thinking, like, there were some times there where it would have been nice to have even a lower gear. And, you know, that's for your 12-hour race or 11-hour race or whatever. It's not for you 9-hour guys. But when you're just trying to maybe make the time cutoffs, just trying to complete the distance, you know, you're not going for speed. You're not going for speed.